Good afternoon. I'm going to do a kind of poll to start off. How many people are married or in a long-term relationship in the room? Okay. What I'm going to talk about today is a little bit like a marriage. So if you were here on Tuesday, you'll see that I was talking about emerging talent, how to develop emerging talent. And I used a football analogy. And I'm going to use another football analogy today. Because I think one of our colleagues who was going to present today couldn't make it, so I'm a substitute. So I'm not going to talk about drilling today. But I am going to talk about a subject that, if you work in oil and gas, will probably impact you sometime in your life. And it's really about acquisitions and mergers. And if you think back to the likes of some of these large companies that we have now, BP were merged with Amoco, Chevron and Texaco merged, Exxon and Mobil, ConocoPhillips. We've seen today Lloyds have bought companies. And so there's a lot of businesses out there that grow by acquisition. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today. My name's Neil Baird. I'm Wood Group PSN's Global Quality Manager. I've worked in oil and gas for 26 years now. And I've various and outer roles, predominantly in topside brownfield modifications and maintenance. I have worked on the drilling side and the fracking side, etc., when we merged with Halliburton, etc. But I'm really going to go and take you through the journey of the merger between Wood Group and PSN and how the challenges that we faced there with two large companies coming together and what we did from a quality management perspective to get through some of those challenges, etc. So, who are Wood Group? Wood Group's a company with 40,000 employees. It's split into three divisions. Wood Group Engineering is predominantly our Mustang operations, which deal with greenfield engineering. It's also JP Kenny, which is subsea engineering, and IMV, which is based in Calgary in Canada. And that's really greenfield. And greenfield engineering is really new build. So it's building a new plant, it's building a new processing plant, a new asset, etc. And that's really what that division actually concentrates on. If I move across to the right, we've got Wood Group GTS, and that is gas turbines. So we basically repair and maintain gas turbines. For instance, we repair all of Rolls-Royce's gas turbines globally. And the reason we do it is we've proved that we can actually do it better than better than Rolls-Royce could. So they actually took us in as the contractor and the preferred contractor to do that for us. So Wood Group Engineering is about 9,000 to 10,000 employees. GTS is about, I think, 5 to 6. And then we've got Wood Group PSN. So what do we do? So Wood Group PSN are what's called a brownfield engineering, a brownfield project management engineering construction contractor. So therefore, you can see along the top line there that we've got basically a project from the start to finish. So right from this point here, where we've got government negotiations, right through to the buying the blocks, etc., the exploration. Then it starts to move into a project phase. And then you start to get into operations and production once that asset is actually either getting designed or getting built. And that's where we come in. And we come in and we can offer, we work in the kind of production facilities piece. And we can offer all the core services from right at the outset in terms of getting in at the front end of that design and starting to work with the operators and with the design houses if we're not doing the design, right through to hooking up the installation offshore and actually, making sure we've got power to the installation, etc. We also do operations. We are a duty holder, so in essence we are an operator as such on 2 or 3 assets in the UK, and that brings with it a whole pile of different challenges and risks to our business. If there was anything that could basically blow our business out of the water, it's that operations piece. We do maintenance, so we're probably about 50% engineering, 50% operations and maintenance at the moment. On the maintenance side, if I give you an idea of how wide and how busy that can be, we are the biggest maintenance contractor in the Gulf of Mexico in the US. We work on something like 14,000 assets from about 37 embark from about 37 locations in the Gulf of Mexico. So that brings a whole pile of logistical challenges. How do we keep in touch with our teams if there's that a change in people coming in and coming out on an ongoing basis? So that's a hugely important piece of our business. Modifications, so that is basically you have an existing asset and we are looking to help you to enhance the production from that asset. It's either maintaining what is already there or taking our engineering and operations knowledge and making it work a bit better than it does. So trying to maximise that. We do a little bit on downstream, so that's kind of down in the, not too much there. We get involved in some debottlenecking studies, etc. And something that we're moving into more and more now is decommissioning, is these offshore rigs in the North Sea, etc., come to the end of their field life. Then we're getting to start in there and we're actually moving into that decommissioning. And we've got work like, for instance, on the Brent decommission. It's probably one of the biggest decommissioning projects as we speak today. The model works quite well in that in today's market where the oil price is, I think, over $100 a barrel, then the operators want to maximise the production from their assets. Therefore, lots of new projects come through. And the clients all say, well, if it's $100 a barrel, then my big project, which is going to cost me $50 billion, becomes more feasible for us to execute. So we get very busy at that point. When the oil price is not so rich, let's say, then they want to optimize what they've got. So therefore, even in a low oil market, oil price market, then we also get busy, but more on the operations and the maintenance side. So it's a kind of best of both worlds of the way that's been designed, to be honest. So that's what we do. The company as such don't have a vision or a mission. We've got a set of what we call core values. And I think there's a couple of my colleagues from Woodgate PSN in the audience today, and they'll probably recognise this in terms of what our core values are. The reason they're designed to look like this, and you'll see it in our brochures and our branding, etc., is it looks like a DNA model. And really what that is it is kind of the core value, the core of our business, and really the DNA of how we operate. There's 7 of them. They're all coloured for certain reasons. So if I look at people, it's a little bit offshoot there, but it's actually supposed to be more of a kind of goldy colour. So they're our kind of gold prize. You know, it's in the centre of the core values. So people are at the core of our business. Red for financial. I know that usually means that if you're in a red, that's not a good place to be. But actually, in old banking terms, if you're in the red, that was actually a very strong place to be. Safety and assurance, etc. You'll see that the word quality does not appear anywhere there. Yet quality is through every single one of those. So the assurance aspect, making sure that what we do and what we engineer and what we build is right. It's keeping the oil in the pipe, it's keeping the gas in the system, etc. And making sure that what we do, all the check-in, all the balances, all the involvement of our third parties and you know, the independent certification bodies, etc., is all around about that assurance element. Relationships, you know, we're only as good as our supply chain. We're only as good as the relationships that we have with our customers. So making sure that we get regular feedback, that we manage, we partner in the supply chain is vital to us. Social responsibility. So as I say, PSN, Woodgate PSN at the moment, it's about 29,000 people. We're in about 40 odd countries. So we wouldn't be able to do that unless we could you know, make use of the local population. We've got a social requirement in a lot of these places to nationalise, and we really want to get in a position where we may bring a lot of expats into an organisation or into a country, train up the local population, and take the expats out. So we're wanting to leave that knowledge and skills in country and take that on board. So a lot of work's been done in that in terms of, you know, I think in Chad where we operate about 600 people, about 95% of that is local Chadians. And we are talking quite literally training people from who have got a kind of who literally is living in a mud hut, and we are living in that type of environment, and it's taking those people on and actually giving them a job. People, as we touched on, they're the heart of our business. We could have the best system and the best process in the world, but unless we've got the people right, it ain't going to work. So we spend an awful lot of time training, educating, and getting our people on board, and they really make a difference. Innovation, that really gives us a competitive advantage. That is our commitment to continually improve. We don't sit in our laurels. We basically have to continue to improve. If we don't, competition will take over. So that's a key piece for that. Lessons learned and all the improvements coming out of that as well. Financial responsibility. You'll see there it doesn't say that we will be the cheapest, we will be the best, etc. But it says that we will get fair reward for what we do. So we're not going to work for you if you're going to give us a 1% margin. It makes no value to us. So we've got, obviously you take all that into consideration, etc. But it's only fair that we get paid for what we do. So a core aspect of that. We are obviously in business to make money, but we're not going to put a huge amount of effort and risk if we're getting very small returns. So that's a business decision that's made. And finally, integrity. The integrity piece really, these are just the kind of snap words. There's more description around about these core values. But the integrity one for me actually expands into we will comply with our management system. We have a system. It is a system of how we manage. It's written there. It tells you how to do things. We will comply with it. It's written and it's been designed that way for a reason. We don't design it to do it wrong. So therefore, there's a real focus on the integrity aspect. So you'll see the core values come right through our business. You'll see it. We use this as a benchmark on which to base decisions. So as I mentioned earlier, if we're going to go into a country where the actual likelihood is that we might struggle to get paid, and there's countries out there where we're in that, we've been in that situation in the past, we may decide not to go into that business. For a long time, we have not worked in Iraq because the situation, for instance, was not safe that we could put people in Iraq. We've now reassessed that. We've got security guys and we've got security experts in the business who have now said, yeah, we believe that in these locations, then it's safe to go in. And we're now moving into Iraq. So these core values are the guidance for which we make some tough decisions, but they're a great baseline for which to come back to. Okay, so kind of academia, this graph here really, we kind of stole this from one of the books, but it really kind of looks at a typical time frame from an acquisition. That's what we're going to talk to you today. Wood Group acquired PSN just over 2 years ago, and we'll go into and discuss that journey in a little bit more detail, etc. But what this shows is the amount of management effort that's required in an acquisition. So, early doors, it's like, as I said, it's like you're in your relationship. So early doors, you're kind of, I was about to say feeling each other out, but that's maybe not the right connotation. But you're getting to know each other a little bit better. You're getting to know everybody's little quirks. You're getting to know what you like, what you don't like. And then you get into a period where you're comfortable with your partner. And then you get to, trust that individual, and you get to kind of understand what kind of makes him happy and what maybe doesn't make him so happy. So it's quite similar with an acquisition. So in the first 100 days, it's really about understanding what that business is. Now, obviously, prior to that, there's a degree of due diligence that's done that, we're in the middle of 2 acquisitions in the US at the present moment, and there's a huge due diligence exercise we're going through at the moment to make sure that we're not buying a company that brings us a degree of risk that is unacceptable to us. So there's a huge amount of due diligence done up front, but once you actually get in the door, then you can get in about the bones of how that company actually operates and how it works. And that first 100 days, as is got here, is actually very similar to what we had in the transition period, which I'll talk to you in a moment. That was really kind of enabling us to kind of place ourselves. Where are the risks? What do we need to do? How do we move this forward, etc. And as you kind of progress over that period, then obviously how you work and the efficiency element goes through the roof. Because take two huge companies together, they've got some great practices, and this company's got some great practices. You can actually merge them together and come up with some pretty fantastic best practice and standard practice. So that really is quite, when we were talking about this the other week, we actually found out that that's actually quite accurate to how we've been and how we've managed it over the last couple of years. So we've got a time frame, so we'll kind of run through just the typical activities that we've covered, and I'll go into a couple of these in a little bit more detail. But the first one was in January 2011. Wood Group acquired a company called PSN for $950 million. So the decision or the announcement came out early January, and because it was such a significant acquisition, it went to what was called the Mergers and Acquisition Board in the UK. Now that was quite a lengthy review, which took through to about the end of May, the end of April, 26th of April, I think, before we could actually announce that. And that was, you know, it had to go to an independent body to kind of say, were we becoming a monopoly on the oil and gas contractors, etc. But thankfully that went through. So the announcement was made in early in January, and we gave ourselves a 5-month window, which was called a transition period. So until that we got approval from the Mergers and Acquisition Board, we could not work together. So if a BP or Shell came out with a new contract, we could not bid that contract as Wood Group PSN. Not until the merger and acquisition approval had came through. So therefore, what we were allowed to do, where we could plan to work with one another. So therefore, we got this 5-month window in which we could, you know, as I say, it's like a relationship. We could get to understand each other. We could come up with a plan for going forward. We could identify what those key risks were. And that's what we used that 5 months. We didn't step back and say, well, let's not do nothing for 5 months and wait for the decision. We actually used that 5 months and got to know each other a little bit better. So just give you a little bit of background. Wood Group at the time were 17,000 people, so quite a substantial business. And as I mentioned, they acquired a company called PSN, who at the time, these were two large competitors. You know, there's probably 4 or 5 brownfield modification specialists in the Aberdeen area at the moment, and these were 2 of the biggest competitors. So therefore, that's why it went to a monopolies commission. PSN 9,000 people. Wood Group had 17,000. PSN probably had the bigger global footprint in that they were in a number of countries, such as Australia. We were in Sakhalin Island, as was mentioned earlier. We were in Asia Pac, whereas Wood Group were more UK-centric, but also in South America and had a bigger footprint in the US as well. That merger was obviously brought in, and we've ended up with Wood Group PSN as to who we are today. So as I say, the one key deliverable that we wanted to get into place, so we couldn't work at all for 5 months, but what we said is, what do we want to have on day one of the new company? And we said, we want to have an HSE policy because it's a legal requirement, and we want to have a quality policy. So therefore, we had a huge plan for all the things that we wanted to do, but that was our key deliverable for day one, was to get a quality policy. As you can imagine, 2 companies coming together, 2 huge corporate organisations, there was going to be a bit of this as to jockeying for position. So I've got an HSE manager here, I've got an HSE manager here. Who's going to be the HSE manager going forward? So all those types of decisions were made through that transition period. The corporate quality team was probably more mature in one of the companies than it was in the other company at that time. So therefore, the corporate quality team from one of the legacy companies kind of just moved in and was kind of deemed to be the Wood Group PSN corporate quality team. So it wasn't so much of that, it was a best fit as such. But on day one, we had the global quality policy issued. Now, our global quality policy, I don't expect you to read it, but it's not a typical quality policy in that, you know, it doesn't go into a lot of detail in terms of we will do X, Y, and Z. What we wanted to do is put the core values in the middle of it. So we thought, why deviate from something that's already established? Why add more verbiage and more words and etc. into something that really, if it's that core to our business, we shouldn't deviate too much from. Now, this is born back to me when we got audited by BP about a year ago, and the BP auditor pulled 3 members from our HR team into the audit and said, "Tell me about your quality policy." And to be fair to the 3 of them, they kind of looked at him as though he had 2 heads. So, quality policy, I don't know what your quality policy is. And then we said, "Right, tell us about your core values." And they could tell, all 7 of them, they told us the right colours, the right sequence in which they came, what they meant, and everything. So by putting that in the core of our quality policy, then we shouldn't deviate too much from that. So that was kind of borne out to us to make sure. It still complies with the requirements of ISO 9000. It's still got commitments to continual improvement. It still commits to the annual review of the policy, etc. But we just wanted to make sure that those core values were inherent in the actual policy. It drives what we do. Obviously, we're coming together with 2 companies. You've also got 2 systems, you've got 2 sets of people, 2 sets of procedures, 2 sets of process, etc., etc. So one of the things that we looked at again was, one of the legacy companies had a very robust corrective action and preventive action tracking system. One of the companies was less so. So we made a decision in this transition period that we will merge one into the other, and that's what we did. That's called a system called Impact, which is an internally designed and built system. And it basically measures all our client feedback, all our non-conformances, and all our preventive actions globally. So we get probably about 1,500 to about 1,700 records coming in on an annual basis, which we can actually do stuff with. We can actually use that data to guide our decision-making processes as such. So, as I say, that was one of the legacy companies that had that system. We very quickly shut down the other system in one of the legacy companies, and we went with this system globally. So, very first piece was to build a spec to get that, because obviously the organisation that had it before was this big, and now this organisation was huge. So all the back end to ensure that this could be reported in South America, it could get reported in Australia, it could get reported in the UK, all that configured. And that was done within about 6 months of the acquisition, and the spec was then given to IT. Similarly, as I mentioned, 2 companies with 2 1,000 certified systems. The drive was to go to a single system. So again, one company quite mature with a single system deployed globally. The other company had grew by acquisition. So therefore, it was less centrally structured. So again, we made the decision, let's go to one system. Let's get that common objective that will drive to one system right across the board. Now, the reason we did that is the oil and gas industry is extremely pushed for resource at the moment. It's incredibly difficult to recruit people right at the moment in time. So we've made the decision that where we can, we'll move work to where the people are. So therefore, we opened up an office in Glasgow. A lot of people were coming from Glasgow and driving up the road to Aberdeen for a week. And that pushed their rates up, and it pushed their salaries up, because they've got to pay for their travel, they've got to pay for their accommodation, etc. So we kind of reversed the psychology, and that says, why not move the work to Glasgow? So we opened up an office in Glasgow, and we've got 500 engineers now working at that Glasgow office. So we've moved the people to where the work is, or where the resource is. Moved the work to where the people. To do that, you've got to have a staff working. There's no way going into a Glasgow office and actually say, well, you're going to work a completely different set of rules and guidance to what we work in Aberdeen. So therefore, we made the decision, let's go to a standardised system. Let's make it the same. So if we're recruiting someone in Glasgow, it's the same process as we recruit someone in Aberdeen. If we're raising an invoice in Glasgow, it's the same system. If we're raising a technical query, it's the same system. And that's what we're trying to drive to. That's a huge exercise. I think probably it'll take about 5 years before our management system is truly effective, because it is a massive exercise. We're talking somewhere in the region 9,000–10,000 documents globally. So it's a huge exercise to look at whose procedure is the best and actually merge that and then embed that in the business. So 2 or 3 management system all over the place. So the phase we started in August was really about getting a handle on what's out there. Phase 2 was then about designing, well, how do we work? Two big companies coming together, how do we do engineering? How do we do recruitment? How do we raise an invoice? How do we raise an IT request? So we'll show you what we did with phase 2. And phase 3 is really a phase that we're still in today. And that is, I have an engineering drawn procedure from Wood Group, and I have an engineering drawn from PSN. Which one's the best? And I might actually have a really good one from Melbourne down here, which is a project specific. Could that be leveraged up to make? So that whole management system project was split into 3. And those are the. Yeah. So that was in this case. That was agreed by our senior executives, and we identified at that point that we didn't, as the quality manager, I didn't have the time to build that. So we actually brought in specific project managers for that and had a standalone project management team to drive that. We had. This was us with a. Their objectives. Objectives. Concentrate and do these. And then for was driving policy, making sure that got rolled out effectively. So what we did is we stripped out an entire layer of additional objectives. And of the 10, so if I'm sitting on a Shell project, for example, I've got 5 local objectives and I've got to implement 5 global objectives. So we've cut down the layers of reporting, and we've also made clear line of sight between what the business is doing and what the projects are doing. So that was a kind of big win, and it also eases the reporting aspect as well. Moving into 2012, with a new structure, the business is set up with an HSEQ function, but that's only at the highest level. As you go down into the organisation, it then starts to split, where we actually have quality managers and HSE managers. But through 2012, we got our first regional quality manager announced, and that was really centred in our Australia business, where we have kind of larger risks. So that was a kind of positive from our perspective. Moving through to April, the preventive and corrective action tracking system that we spoke about earlier, and the spec, so the spec was built by our IT guys, that was then rolled out globally. What we try to do with that is, because you're rolling stuff out globally, you've got to come at it from many different angles. So communication is key here. So we held face-to-face training, we did webinars, we did one-to-one, one-to-many, we created booklets, online guidance, online induction. We over-communicated it. And I would propose, if you're doing any of these system improvements, I would rather over-communicate it than under-communicate it. Part of the management system, so as I come back to my slide I had earlier, we had our management system build was done into three phases. Phase 1 was to get a handle on what's out there. Phase 2 was then to define how we work. So we started to look at these level 2, what we call level 2 process models. So a typical example of a level 2, that's typically our quality process model. So you can probably see it's a plan, do, check, act cycle. Management and planning, so that's really how do we set the objectives, how do we actually plan to resource and execute those objectives. Then the doing piece is really what we do. That's, you know, we buy equipment, we maintain equipment, we install equipment, and we maintain and build facilities. So product and service quality, that's what we design. Supply chain, it's what we buy. Quality control is what we buy and how we make sure it's correct. And then the worksite quality is our guys actually at the worksite. So if we are installing a piece of equipment on a site, we may have an inspector sitting there watching what the guy does. And that's what that worksite quality is. The assurance piece, that links into our core value. So it's the how do we check it? How do we make sure it's right? How do we make sure that that thing that we've got over here that we've designed has gone through, it's been put together by a competent person, it's been checked by a competent person, and it's been signed off by a competent person. So in this assurance piece, there's all our process health checks, our audit activity, etc. And then with the improvement loop feeding back into, as I mentioned earlier, we've got 1,700 records coming in on an annual basis. We look at that records, and that then impacts and tells us, well, where do we need to focus next year? What's going right and what's going wrong? So that's just typical at highest level, one of our models that we've got. And we've got that for all kind of cross-functional models, for engineering, operations, maintenance, accounts, HR, IT. We have actually sat there and facilitated how's it we actually work. So in May of last year, we built the quality one. In June, as I mentioned, we were two separate companies who had independent certification to ISO 9000. So therefore, we wanted to say, well, why do we get certified by BSI and why do we get certified by LRQA? Surely there's synergies there, so let's go to one provider. So therefore, we generated a tender and we went out to market with that tender for the certification services. Again, just try to cut down on that supply chain. The next thing we looked at was really, okay, so we've now spent a year, we know how we operate. What do we want to put there as the new Wood Group PSN quality expectations? So therefore, we created a quality manual, and our new quality manual. We had a kind of an interim one produced earlier. Given the diversity of the type of work that we do, so you know, from duty holder where we're actually operating, right through to basically labour supply in the States, through to, you know, we are actually producing stuff in the States. We're building manifolds, we're fabricating, we do engineering design, we do hookup, we do construction. We've got 4 people working for BP at the moment who are ex-speechwriters for President Obama. And any communication you see coming out of BP in the US is written by a PSN person. So our business is massively diverse. So therefore, we wrote the quality manual in a little bit more generic terms. We identified 15 elements. So we did, and I'll apologize if I offend anybody in the room, but it's a pet hate of mine that I see a quality manual written against the clauses of ISO 9000. And the reason I say that is we don't do our business as per ISO 9000. If I went and spoke to an engineer and says, show me your product realization function, he would look at me as though I was daft. So therefore, what we try to do is we try to put it into simple language that people could understand. And we've put it into simple language because, you know, everybody's responsible for quality. Accounts, the project controls people. Again, I mentioned on Tuesday, if we don't get an invoice right first time and it comes back in, that's a quality problem. It's rework. It's time that that person then needs to go and spend fixing it. Could be fixing it. Could be working on something that's more productive. So we wrote these quality manual around about this. These 15 elements, and this we'll kind of touch on it a little bit later. Again, I've seen a quality manual that somebody writes and it goes on a shelf, and I call them dust collectors. So if you've got a quality manual, yeah, here it is, blows the dust off. It's never been used in the past. So therefore, we've built a quality manual which is a set of performance expectations, but we get these projects and contracts to self-assess themselves again. And we'll come on to that in a minute. So it's a live document. It's not one of these that sit on a shelf and nobody looks at. So in August, So phase 2, as I spoke about earlier. So you can now see it's a company. It's now, by this time, it's grown to about 29,000 employees. We do all kinds of stuff. I think we've got, through acquisition, we've got a Honda dealership in Australia. We've got 2 hairdressers in Nigeria. So a whole pile of stuff in there. Not core business, but there. So we've actually mapped out how we work. So from right at the enterprise level, so how we set business objectives, how we position ourselves, how are we going to win that next contract with Shell, how are we going to win that next contract with BP. So our entire BD and marketing process is actually established and set in this manner. How do we start a contract? So when we open up an office in Sakhalin, how do we do that? You've got all the legal, all the tax, all the hardware, the software, the people, massive amount of complexities in there. And once we win the work, how do we start the work? So how do you, from the moment you get a work order in to say, I want this engineered, how do you do that? So that entire process right across our business has been mapped out in how we do it. Going down a level, so if I go into, right, how do we engineer? So we then go in and we map that out in more greater detail. So how we initiate it, how we do feasibility studies, how we do concepts through feed, detailed design, interface with construction commission, right through to how do we close that and as-build that drawing and give it back to the client. We've got that entire process mapped. And again, right down to what we call a sub-process. So if I click on this concept piece, it then tells me how do I do a concept study. So right from receiving the work, consider work share as we call it, do all this statement of requirements, etc., etc. So this is a great educational tool for our people coming into our organisation. The contractor business is an extremely difficult business to work in because we've got such a transient workforce. I'm not sure if our HR colleagues in the business could tell me at the moment in terms of what our split is between staff personnel and contractor personnel. But because of the market it is at the moment, people come and people go. The guy at work for AMEC last week could be working for PSN this week. The guy at work for PSN this week could be working for Petrofac next week. So they're continually changing, and by being able to show them this is how we work is a great educational and training tool for those individuals. Well, that actually then goes down into down to the procedures. So for all these steps here, if I want to find out how do I agree an SOR, a statement of requirement, I would click on that button. It would actually open up all the documents that's relevant to agreeing a statement of requirement. And that's an integrated management system. It's not just the engineering documents that's in there. It's so what do I need to talk to supply chain about? What do I need to talk to quality about? What do I need to talk to, if I'm developing an SOR, I'll probably need an HSE plan. So you link in, it's actually fully integrated. So it's a full process approach that we've got across our business. And that's a fair bit of work in that piece alone. That's a huge exercise to get that there. Towards the back end of last year, we got it to the point where we had the whole business mapped. As I said, we brought in experts in that. And as I said earlier, we are one of 3 divisions within Wood Group PSN. So therefore, we were able to share the IMAP piece with other divisions. So for instance, our Mustang business, they were away to spend £1 million on consultants. We said, we've got a solution here. So we sent our guy over there. In 3 months, he had managed to map out what they were going to do, and it was going to spend £1 million doing that. So a bit of knowledge sharing and a bit of lessons learned there. Ian in the corner here, he'll be pleased that through our negotiations, we gave the third-party certification contract, the LRQA. So they are now our UK certification body. And then in September last year, again, we moved on and we got all the guys in a room to say, right, we're a year down the line from the merger. What are we doing well? What aren't we doing well? What have we got to do better? And again, that was feedstock into the bigger global HSEQ workshop, which was held in October last year. We committed to getting the single cert in the UK by the end of last year, and we managed to do that by going to LRQA, as I say. So there is a process by which you transfer from one certification body to the other, and we did that in November, and we're awarded a UK-wide ISO 9000, 14000, and 18001 certificate for our entire UK business. We started doing that also around the globe because there are other parts of business who are certified by their certification bodies, such as DNV in Australia. We are now in a position where I think there's only one remaining location, and we will go to almost get an LRQA global certification there. So again, we went through the same exercise. We still work with the 5 and 5, so we had 5 global objectives, which was then supplemented on the contracts and fed right through the contracts, so pure line of sight that we got. And when we spoke earlier about quality manual, and quality manuals, as I said, in terms of what the old dust collector, and we write a manual to be compliant, we don't really do anything with a manual. We wanted to make it a live document, so therefore we created a quality manual self-assessment. So the 15 elements that we took, we built a set of questions around about those expectations. So for leadership, that was, does your project or contract manager talk about quality? Do they support quality initiatives? Do they drive quality into the business? Do they talk about the core values? So all of those objectives and all of those expectations were built into a self-assessment and issued to the business for the business to undertake a self-assessment against. So therefore, we get a picture on where we are globally in terms of the deployment of quality on projects. Interesting to see, an observation that we've had recently is we've got a lot of quality control people in our organisation and less quality assurance. And if you look at that, that's kind of borne out with this because these are kind of quality assurance and we're teetering around about the 50 mark. And then you kind of start to go into quality control and we'll say we're really good at quality control. We're less good in here and less good in the improvement aspect. So that's where our area of focus is going to be going forward, is to get a little bit more balance in there. That is an annual exercise, so the guys fill in an assessment against where they're at. That is not a picture of how the quality function works. That's a picture of quality in a project. So it's a discrete definition there, a discrete difference between the two. This is not how good your quality engineer is. This is how good your project management and their approach to quality is on a contract. So I just want to kind of make sure that points across. That is now an annual exercise. What happens is the guys self-assess themselves. They are required to give us objective evidence. That objective evidence comes into a central location. We then question them and query them on that objective evidence. What we don't want to say is, yeah, we're great at quality planning. And then we go in and say, right, show me your quality plan. Oh, I haven't got one. So we're looking for that objective evidence to verify that they have actually done this exercise correctly. We're now in 2013. And you'll see, all through what I've spoken about today takes a lot of effort, a lot of training, a lot of guidance, a lot of communication, a lot of resource. But we were in a place at the end of last year where we felt we've got our system sorted. We're starting to get our processes sorted. Let's focus on the people. So you'll see that this year our process is slightly now moved towards getting the culture and the people right. At the outset of the year, we established competence assessments and competence assurance profiles for all our quality personnel. And these you'll probably recognise by now, and you can read. Those 15 elements, the same 15 elements as are in a quality manual. So what we're saying is use this document like your Bible. Do this right and you'll deliver a good job. And that's what we are assessing our quality engineers against and our quality advisors against. Now, my earlier point where I said, you know, this is not an assessment of the quality engineers. They facilitate and they help this to happen. But when it comes down to competence, this is what we're looking at. So we've looked at this and you see my position there. So I'm expected to be, you know, leading the way and all the rest of it, right down to our, you know, virtually our guys who are new in the door. And this competence assessment is being implemented as we speak, and it'll be completed by the end of the year. So we've everybody in the function, and I think at the moment I've got about 270 in the quality function. Everybody's going to be competency assessed by the end of the year. Coming back out, we recognised that in the oil and gas, and some of the figures, as I spoke about this on Tuesday, some of the published figures say between the next 5 years, oil and gas require between 10,000 and 125,000 new resource. So where are you going to get that resource from? So we recognise that. We've got a strategic resourcing group set up within our organisation. We are looking outside oil and gas. We're looking at nuclear. We're looking at construction. We're speaking to people in the police. We're MOD. We're trying to get these quality professionals in because they've got transferable skills. Some of our best people come from manufacturing. And I'm sure, Ian, you've probably experienced this as well in dealing with BP. BP, on the back of Macondo, are going right back to their supply chain. And they're not taking guys that work in oil and gas for the last umpteen years. They're going for guys that work with Ford and work with aerospace and highly reliable companies and industries, and they're going getting auditors from those locations. So they're all about process and how things work. So a huge set of transferable skills that you've got there. So we recognise that, and we wanted to start a strategic partnership with RGU. A few reasons for that. We want to help you guys. We want to help you mature in your career. We want to give you an opportunity to come and work with us. We want to support you. We want to share some of this stuff that we've got with you. So, and we also say, obviously, we see you as a resource pool that we can tap into in the future. You're future quality leaders, so therefore we want to get involved with yourselves. So we've sponsored the award. We're doing some other stuff with Llewellyn and his team, etc. So we were kind of keen to explore that relationship a bit further, but that is a long-term relationship we've got with RGU. In April again, as we've matured, we've started to update these global metrics. They're a little bit more enlightening, let's say. So we're moving in the right direction there. We identified that some of our technical, what we call a technical auditor. So you've got a quality auditor. A quality auditor can go in, but a quality auditor can only do so much. So I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm not a mechanical engineer. So therefore, I would be uncomfortable going in and auditing electrical or mechanical engineering. The guy, I could ask the guy, do you have a data calc or do you have a drawing for that? And he said, yeah, there it is. And I said, great, tick. But I don't know if that's good, bad or indifferent because I don't know. I'm not an engineer. So therefore, what we do is we employ technical auditors in our team, and they're part of the global technical assurance, to do those audits for us. So that guy will sit there. Have you got a drawing? Yes. Have you got a calc? Yes. Let me see it. I'm going to check it. I'm going to sit with a calculator and check it to make sure the integrity of that calculation. What those guys weren't so good at was the audit process. So therefore, we are actually training them as technical auditors. Now the reason Ian's going there going, cha-ching, I could get in there and do that. The reason that we train them is the majority of those guys are contract personnel. So we can't pay for them to become trained because it impacts on their tax status. So therefore we train them. And we're giving that training to those guys. And I think we've trained about 40, 45 of them at the present moment. And that's now starting to bear fruit. So we've identified we've got a people issue, and we're now starting to see consistency. We're starting to see right definition of corrective action, etc., etc. One of the key means, one of the key things that we'll touch on at the end of this is communication. And what we've also done is we've launched a new intranet site. So before, again, as I say, we were quite disparate in all the different pieces. All the information was sitting in a whole pile of different locations. And we've now launched a single quality intranet site. So any of my quality leads or quality resources can access any information now relating to their work in one place. All our audit information is in one place. All our guidance, all our presentation materials, all the information on IMAP, all the competency profiles, all the training, all our reporting, all our information on suppliers is all in one location. So these guys, anywhere in the world, can access this information now. The next piece in there is we want to kind of make use of the collaboration piece. So we're going to put in some kind of discussion threads, etc. So if a guy in Chad has got a problem with a certain type of valve and he doesn't know the inspection criteria on it, he can go in here and he's then got access to a huge network of 270 quality professionals. So that's the next stage for us, is to move into that. Stuck? Anyway. Sorry. Just computer catching up with itself. Last year, in Woodgroup PSN, we did something in the region of about 400 audits internally. Now, do I have all that information at hand? The answer is no. Do I know who's competent and qualified to be an auditor globally? No. I know what the audit results were, because all the actions go into Impact, which is our central tracking system. But if I wanted to say, right, I'm going to go and audit Joe Bloggs, the engineering fabricator, who's got an office in Dice, let's go in and audit him. I could audit him, and my colleague that works for a different project could be sitting there auditing him at the same time. So therefore, we've got no real management in our audit. So one of the things that the guys are working on now is an audit management system, which will be a centralized system. It'll show me all my audits, who's doing them, when they're doing them. It'll show me all the results, whether they're satisfactory. It'll show me where my risks were. It'll show me if I did an audit in June and I still don't have a report. It'll show me all that information. So we're piloting a system at the moment which is a simple system, but it'll grow and get better as we move on. As I say, we're now 2 years down the line in Woodgroup PSN, and there's now a culture starting to come through in how the organisation works and how it does. But we want to take advantage of that culture, and we want to test that culture. We see and we track what we call failures to fit in technical incidents. So we design pipe spools, for instance. That pipe spool goes offshore, it doesn't fit. So why did it not fit? Was it a design error? Was it a fabricator error? Was it a check and approval error? Did the guy just put his name in a drawing and not really check it? So we have then recognised a number of things here are actually down to people. So therefore, we're starting to now address what's the quality culture in the business. We're not only looking at Joe Bloggs, the engineer, we're actually looking at the employee, we're looking at the supervisor, and we're looking at the manager. And we've stolen shamelessly from our HSE function, who have been doing this for years, and safety culture ladder assessments and all the rest of that. We want to move that into a quality world. So why did the engineer not sign that drawing? Or why did he not check it? Or why, if he's put his signature down, does his signature not mean anything? So we're actually piloting this as we speak, and we'll get an idea on what the culture in terms of quality is. And again, you know, why did we get the invoice wrong? Why did we not get that the HR piece of paper signed off, which means that that guy didn't get employed on that day when he should have been there? So we're moving into that, and we're moving, as I say, we're kind of trying to focus now on the culture and the people, because that's really the crux of the kind of good quality management. On Monday, we've got quality managers flying in from Australia, and guys coming in from Canada, Houston, etc., etc. And really, we have spent the last 2 years since the acquisition trying to get to a place of a kind of steady ship, let's say. On Monday, we're going to start looking at, say, right, what do we need to do in the next 3 years? How do we go forward? How do we improve? So this is going to be the first time we've actually had a 3-year quality strategy. It's going to come out of the discussions on Monday, and then laterally Wednesday, Thursday next week. So we're kind of moving, we are where we are. We've done a lot of good work over the last 2 years, but what's the next level? How do we push that on? So we know already there's probably going to be stuff about assurance in there, about people, about embedding our systems, etc., etc. These are kind of key and core feedback to that. We've already engaged with senior management and got their feedback. I've got my guys filling in these quality cultural assessment tools so we can use that information. And I'm using hard data. So what does the information come at impact tell us? What does IMAP tell us? What does those quality manual self-assessments tell us? All that data, perception and feedback we're using to guide where we're heading. So coming out of that, you'll be glad to see it's my last slide. What have we learned? So this is a 2-year program that we've gone down now. It's not the first time that I've been involved in acquisition, and it won't be the last. As I said, we're looking to buy 2 companies in the US. One is a small company with about 30 people. The other one's a huge investment with about 20 workshops all over the US. So that brings an additional element of risk. But what we learned, what's the key or the core elements there? Resource. You can't just expect that these things will happen. You've got to have the right resource in it. My corporate team is doubled in size to enable us to do these things. You've got to have that people working in a team towards a common purpose and common objective. As I say, it's really like some of the key themes there are like a marriage. You've got to communicate to one another. You've got to make sure that you communicate often and you communicate in a various number of means. And common purpose. We will work on one management system. We will have one action tracking system. We'll have one audit procedure. We'll have one NCR procedure. That's all kind of common purpose stuff that we've been working on. So we're taking these things and we're now putting that into us now acquiring companies. So I don't know if you read in the press, just probably about 3 months ago, we bought a company called Pyroy, which is 1,800 people. They do fabric maintenance. So they're now working offshore and they're doing paint and scaffolding. They completed a job that they said would never be completed because they finished painting the fourth rail bridge, and they're also painting Ark Royal, which is the big carrier down there. So it's quite a diverse. Again, the business is diversifying, but we're taking the lessons that we've learned out of this and applying it to that acquisition, and we'll do the same when we acquire these 2 companies in the US. So I've waffled on a bit. I'm sorry about that in terms of the time. But that's gonna. It's your Mickey Mouse. It's my Mickey Mouse watch, yeah. So thank you for your time and attention this afternoon, and I'll answer any questions at the end, and I'll hand over to our esteemed colleague from our other drilling partners here. Okay, thank you.